We underwrite all of our deals with long-term financing just to make sure that it makes sense. Kind of worst case scenario, like if the worst case scenario is we get 1750 for rent, does this deal still make sense? It has to be a yes. Otherwise, we don't do it. Um, from there, we'll try to maximize cash flow on pretty much every deal. So for us, you know the kind of really good middle ground is a midterm rental, which is just a rental that's over 30 days, but usually less than a year. It's short term rentals are mainly under 30-day leases. Long term rentals are usually a year lease. So on the midterm, you're furnishing the property, you're putting in all the furniture, uh, you're listing it as just bring a suitcase, come to town for a month and rent this place. And the benefits are that you're actually getting more in rent than you would on a long term, uh, and less than a short term, but there's a lot less turnover than a short term rental. So that's the main method that we're doing for most of these deals.
Yeah, the benefit of midterm rental is twofold. One, it's kind of like short term, but it's not short term. So it's furnished rental to begin with. The cash flow is higher. However, the it's a middle ground, right? So the cities and the jurisdictions that does not allow short-term rentals, they have to allow midterm rental because technically it's a lease. It's 30 days over. So you have a tenant in there, you don't have a guest in there.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And it's our way of, we haven't been in any market where short-term rentals have just gone away. Like Denver has some pretty tight restrictions on short-term rentals, but midterm is kind of just open, like open season. So we figured without having to do the high turnover, it's definitely harder to do when you're remote. You're managing property management and uh and potentially like cleaners who have to go in there every 2 to 3 days. Um, that's just intensive. So on a midterm rental, we're getting the benefit of the higher cash flow, but our turnover is every 1 to 2 months instead of every 2 to 3 days. Which talking to some short-term rental investors here in town, they're like 1.6 days is their average turnaround. That means that every 1.6 days there's laundry and turnover, cleaners, everybody going into the property every other day. On properties that you own that are thousands of miles away, it's a lot better peace of mind if those are turning over every month or two instead of every 3 days. To have a problem come up would be
Well, plus,
stressful.
if you're doing it for 30 properties, it's easier to manage, let's say, from a governmental standpoint. If I'm doing two, three properties, but the moment you scale 30 some properties, then you are constantly busy chasing these cleaners and housekeeping and this and that. Versus with midterm rental, it's not as much. So
Exactly.
not only the money part, but it's also the management and you just get sick and tired. I mean, it becomes another business rather than investing.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't want to manage teams of cleaners. So
No. Now, this leads into midterm rental. Let's go a little bit more deeper into that. How do you find your clients? Do I advertise on Zillow? What do I do to find my clients? How do you find them?
to find those renters, so for midterm rental, FurnishFinder.com is really good. And midterm, we found that Vrbo.com is also really good. If you're putting in leases there that are over 30 days, we're getting a good mix of both of those sites. Furnish Finder is great for, the traditional traveling contractors, traveling nurses, grandparents in town who need a place to stay for 1 or 2 months. Vrbo is good for those people as well, but also caters to people who are also kind of wanting to take a longer term vacation. Like, if they want to go, you know, be close to their kids who are in college for 2 months, they would rent, uh, a house like one of ours in Lincoln, Nebraska, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And between the two sites, have you had any, do you prefer something? Is there any extra strategy that you use for Verbo? Or so how are you doing it? Because Furnish Finder is for like, it started off with traveling nurses and stuff. Now a lot more professionals are on there. But Verbo basically mostly has been used by short-term rentals. But you, I'm sure, have some kind of a different strategy to use Verbo for your midterm.
Yeah, so my friend Dan does Vrbo here in north of Denver, and talking to him, he really enjoys it because he's basically Airbnb's the big dog. Vrbo is the definitely a smaller platform, but he found that he could perform really well. If anybody was searching in you know that northern Colorado, like just north of Denver sector, on Vrbo, his would pop up, pretty much top three. Because it is a smaller platform, if you can get your reviews and if you can get, all of the metrics that you need up and running, you will stand out on that smaller platform much easier than, having to get 1,000 reviews on Airbnb to pop up in, Omaha, Nebraska as part of the top 10. That's a whole different story than trying to be like top 10 on a smaller platform. And and I agree with him. He had told me that the kind of quality of the tenant is a bit higher. No, I haven't had any issues with like parties and wedding parties coming to town and just like trashing our house or anything like that. So it seems like the clientele is just geared a little bit more differently than the Airbnb clientele. And between that and it being you being able to stand out on the platform a little bit easier, between those two things, I'm really in favor for it for midterm rental. I have no complaints on it at all.
Yeah, I agree with you on the quality of the clients that you find on Vrbo versus Airbnb versus their other channels like Booking.com and Expedia, and then few more. Every every channel, as they call it, every channel have a kind of like a clientele, and Vrbo clientele is usually much experienced, professional, and they're just better. Whereas Airbnb is more, they're like fast moving, like fast moving consumer goods, right? So
Totally.
yeah, much more over there. Between